You've probably watched 100 videos on how to make your home feel cozy, but I'm here to tell you that the word cozy barely means anything. Ask 10 people what coziness feels like, and you'll get completely different answers. For one person, it's a quiet beige room with linen curtains. For another, it's red walls, books piled everywhere, and a table full of friends. Those two interiors may have almost nothing in common, and yet both can feel completely right to the person living inside. I've seen this firsthand in my own life and in the homes of my clients, and that's why as an interior decorator I begin every project with one question. It's not how can we make this room look beautiful, but what does the person need their home to do for them? Maybe what you're actually chasing when you say you want a cozy home has another name. I call it resonance. The feeling of living in a home that vibrates at the same frequency as the person inside it. And over time, I began to notice that this feeling of resonance is shaped by 4 forces: climate, symmetry, scale, and triggers. By the end of this video, you'll understand how each of these forces affects the way your home feels and which one may not be working in your favor. As we go through them, keep one room in mind. It might be the room you're sitting right now, or one you've never quite managed to feel at home in. The first one begins before you even enter the room. It begins outside your window. A home should never argue with the world outside its window. It should do one of two things: continue that world or compensate for it. And I don't mean today's weather forecast. I mean the emotional climate that lives outside your window for months at a time. Take a second and picture the light where you live. Is it sharp and generous, soft and gray? Does it pour into the room, or do you spend most of the year trying to catch it? Look at the films of Spanish director Pedro Almodóvar. His interiors explode with red, green, cobalt blue, and yellow. In Spain, that kind of color isn't fighting to stay alive. It's being fed by the light itself. The same color behaves differently under different light. Beneath a strong, generous sun, a saturated red can feel vivid and full. Under weaker, grayer light, it may become heavier or muddier. So if you take Almodóvar's most intense red and move it beneath a northern winter sky, let's say in Sweden, it won't carry the same emotional energy anymore. And that gives us the first principle, the law of continuation. When the world outside is already generous, full of sunlight, color, your home can continue that energy. But what happens when the world outside has very little to give you? Take a city the sun rarely visits. Architect Carlo Rossi painted his St. Petersburg ensembles in a warm ochre yellow. Historically, that color was partly a statement of imperial triumph, but it did something else too, whether Rossi intended it as therapy or not. That particular yellow carried warmth even when the sky didn't cooperate, and that gives us the opposite principle, the law of compensation. When the world outside has nothing to give you, your home's job is to give you back exactly what's missing. I live in Warsaw, and winters here are dark. The sky turns gray by early afternoon, and it stays that way for months. There are winter days when I look outside a window and I feel as though the entire city has been drained of life. And many of my friends here describe the same thing. Winter makes it hard to find the energy to function. That's exactly why my own home can't afford to be pastel or monochrome. If it were, I don't think I'd cope. I know that sounds dramatic, but color in my home is a crutch I lean on when I cannot generate that energy by myself. So before choosing a palette, look out the window. Not at today's weather, but at the weather that lives there. And then ask, does my home need to continue this world or compensate for it? And be honest, you may love the idea of pale Scandinavian interior, but does your body actually want to live inside one during a dark February? There are 2 practical ways to use this. First one, the Rossi move. When your natural light is soft and gray for much of the year, use large areas of warm, slightly muted color, ochre, warm cream, muted apricot, dusty yellow, or soft terracotta. These colors carry warmth without needing direct sunlight to activate them. Use them across a wall, a ceiling, curtains, or even the floor. But suppose you love intense saturated color and don't live under that sun. There is another way in, and it's almost the opposite. Paint the walls white first. This way you create a completely blank canvas for playing with bold colors. Because white is the absence of color, and it won't interfere with that play. Almodóvar himself used that hack. But choosing individual colors is only half the problem. How do you make them live together? Marc Chagall, one of the greatest colorists, answered this almost like a riddle. Colors are friends of their neighbors and lovers of their opposites. In other words, colors usually work in one of two ways. They sit comfortably beside their close relatives, different shades of the same hue. Or they come alive when paired with their opposite on the color wheel. This is the basic idea. Color theory goes much deeper than this. So if you're interested, I've left my complete guide to color and its psychological effects in the description. Color alone can't determine a room's rhythm. For that, we have to look the way objects are arranged. Symmetry Asymmetry. Symmetry is calm, but one wrong move and that calm curdles into boredom. Asymmetry is movement, but one wrong move and that movement tips into chaos. Look around the room you chose at the beginning. Where does your eye settle? Does it understand the space immediately? Or does it keep searching for somewhere to land? Your brain is negotiating between the two in every room you enter. It wants enough order to understand the space, but enough variation to remain awake in it. Think of a Greek temple. At first glance, it appears to be a perfect exercise in symmetry, proportion, and repetition. But look more closely, and the geometry isn't completely rigid. Greek architects introduced tiny optical refinements. Columns swell almost imperceptibly, horizontal lines curve, and proportions shift just enough to appear perfect to the human eye. The secret? The temple feels harmonious, not because every line is mechanically perfect. There is movement hidden inside the order. The eye senses stability, but never lifelessness. Now take the opposite extreme. In the Austrian countryside, architect Friedrich Hundertwasser created a thermal spa called Rogner Bad Blumau. And if the Greek temple hides a whisper of motion inside symmetry, this building doesn't hide anything. In fact, it screams very openly. There are almost no straight lines. The roofs are covered in grass and rise like small hills, so the building doesn't stand on the ground. It grows out of it. Windows are different shapes and sizes and never line up with the ones beside them. Even floors are deliberately uneven. Hundertwasser believed that rigid lines separated us from nature. For him, irregularity was a way of reminding the body that it was still alive. So, which is it? Is symmetry calm and asymmetry chaos? Not necessarily. Order can contain movement, and apparent chaos can contain a hidden structure. I'm a calm person by nature. Slow-moving, more introvert than extrovert. That's exactly why my own homes were never calm. I filled them with asymmetry, with a little too much color, a controlled kind of chaos. Because if my home perfectly mirrored my natural stillness, I'm not sure I would ever get up. And this is one of the biggest mistakes people make when designing for themselves. They ask, what resembles me? But sometimes the better question is, what supports me? Your home doesn't always need to repeat your temperament. Sometimes it needs to be balanced. If you're a naturally restless, high-energy person who dreams of coming home to actual rest, choose symmetry. Let your home be the one place that doesn't ask anything of you. If you're naturally passive and quietly starving for stimulation, surround yourself with the unexpected. Break the order. Let asymmetry do the work your temperament can't do for itself. And if you already feel balanced, don't correct yourself unnecessarily. Just let the space continue your nature. By now, you may already see that resonance is not a style. It's a relationship between what you need and what your home gives back. But color and arrangement are still only the visible layer. You can have the right palette and the right rhythm and still feel strangely uncomfortable. Because every room speaks at a certain volume, and that volume is created by scale. In the Troodos mountains of Cyprus, you can find a Byzantine church so small you could touch its ceiling without raising your arm all the way. Walk inside, and every surface is covered in Byzantine frescoes, some of them nearly 1,000 years old. And naturally, you'd expect a room this small to feel like a cupboard, but instead, it feels enormous, like the sacred has come close enough to breathe on you. Now, stand inside St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. The scale does the opposite of everything you just felt. It doesn't lean in, it rises until you disappear. You feel quite literally like a grain of sand under the dome. So what's that? The subject is the same, the sacred, the infinite, the existence of something larger than one human life. But the architecture delivers that feeling in exactly the opposite direction. The tiny church shrinks the direction between you and the sacred. St. Peter's shrinks you. One wraps itself around the body, the other swallows you whole. Now think of two spaces from your own life. One in which you felt protected and one in which you felt exposed or insignificant. The emotional power of a space has surprisingly little to do with its actual size. A small room can make you feel embraced. A vast room can make you feel humbled. Scale doesn't determine the feeling itself, it determines the direction in which that feeling travels. Does the room expand around you? Or do you become smaller inside the room? Some people need the first, some people need the second. The philosopher Gaston Bachelard called one version of this paradox intimate immensity. In a small, enclosed space, your attention has nowhere to wander outward, so it turns inward. The room can feel infinite not because the architecture contains infinity, but because it releases it inside you. A vast space sends attention in the opposite direction. Your individual life becomes one small part of something larger. That is awe, and awe often requires the self to shrink. So before you decide your home needs to be bigger, ask yourself, which direction do I want the space to move me? Maybe open space doesn't register in your body as freedom. Maybe it reads as exposure. Maybe you're calmer inside the room that holds you, the way the tiny church held everyone who ever walked into it. Or perhaps small rooms make you feel trapped. There is no correct answer here. Your body usually answers before your taste does. The thing is, you can create emotional intensity in a 30 square meter flat or 500 square meter house. The question isn't how much space you have. It's how your existing space is already shaping your perception and whether you want to amplify that effect or contract it. If you want the St. Peter's effect, that outward monumental feeling, make the room feel larger and let yourself feel smaller within it. Use verticals, hang curtains close to the ceiling, choose one tall piece rather than several small ones. Let one large artwork or a true statement piece anchor the entire room. Give the eye a reason to travel upward, and don't feel every empty corner. Leaving empty space around an object makes it feel more important. If you want a Cyprus church effect, that inward, intimate expansion, do the opposite. Lower the furniture, bring light down to eye level, create smaller pools of activity inside the room. Use a chair, rug, lamp, and side table to form a protected island rather than pushing everything against the walls. The moment a room stops trying to impress you from a distance, it can begin to hold you instead. Well, all of this, color, symmetry, scale, can help you create beautiful interior and the feeling you are after. But there's one more thing without which a home never truly wakes up. The breeze of life that turns a sculpted piece of clay into something with a soul. Marcel Proust once tasted a piece of Madeleine dipped in tea, and before he consciously understood why, he was overwhelmed by a feeling. Only afterward did the memory reveal itself. Combray, his childhood, his aunt's room, the town, the garden, the streets, an entire world returning through one taste. He called this involuntary memory. Not the kind of remembering you do deliberately when you try to recall a date, a name or a face. That kind, he said, gives you only facts, a dead version of the past. Involuntary memory returns the state itself. It arrives uninvited through a taste, a smell, a texture, and it doesn't simply remind you that something happened. For a moment, it hands the feeling back to you, whole, still warm, exactly as the body once knew it. That's the reason real objects matter in a home. The right ones reconnect you with a part of yourself you hadn't realized you'd lost, because they are switches. Look around you now. Is there an object in the room that changes your state before you even consciously think about it? A photograph, a book, maybe a piece of fabric or something you brought home from a journey? There is a scene in Eric Maria Remarque's Heaven Has No Favorites that I often think about. Lillian is living with death close enough to feel. Suddenly, she spends what little she has on dresses. Why spend the last money on things you may barely have time to wear? Because when Lillian wakes at night from a nightmare, in a room with no history, no real warmth, nothing that says, "This is mine," the first thing her eyes find are the shapes of the dresses. Their silk, their color, their radiance, life itself still hanging there, refusing to leave the room even as she leaves it. The dresses aren't vanity, they're switches placed within reach of a frightened body. Proust's Madeleine finds him accidentally. Lillian uses the same principle deliberately. She engineers the state she needs because she can't afford to leave it to chance. And perhaps that is one of the most important things a home can do. Place the state you need within reach of your body. And once you begin choosing objects because of the emotional states and memories they carry, you run into another problem. A human life is never lived in a single style. One object may come from your childhood, another from a journey, another may remind you of someone you loved or a person you're trying to become. They all belong to the same life, but visually they may belong to completely different styles. Place your grandma's Baroque cabinet in the middle of a contemporary interior, and it will probably feel completely out of place. This is where the aesthetics re-enters the story as a way of allowing emotionally meaningful objects to coexist. One of the best examples comes from Karl Lagerfeld's homes. He treated each apartment as its own universe, and one of his Paris interiors shows exactly how objects from entirely different centuries can occupy the same room. In a single view, you can see a set of black lacquered chairs from the 19th century, a statue of two women dated to the late 18th century, crisp white walls, and door frames belonging to a completely different design era, but they were connected by visual relationships. You don't need to make meaningful objects look alike, you only need to give them something through which they can recognize one another. A repeated color, an echoed shape, or a related pattern. A red thread can move from a cushion to a vase and then into painting, introduce 2 or 3 pattern notes, and they become a deliberate layer of rhythm. A striped chair, a checked throw, a geometric lampshade, and this is the principle I want you to remember. One unusual object can look accidental. 2 objects create a conversation. 3 establish a language. Our brain searches for relationships, and once those relationships exist, a Baroque cabinet no longer looks lost inside a contemporary interior. Your home doesn't need to reduce your life to one coherent style. It only needs to reveal the connections within it. There is no single formula for coziness. Every home asks us to live differently because every person carries a different meaning of home within them. Sometimes a home should feel like a fairy tale you can step into. Sometimes it should become a spiritual anchor, and sometimes it should allow you to travel without ever leaving it into another century, another culture, or maybe the world that previously existed only in your imagination. But before you think about what your home should look like, ask what state you want it to return you to, what part of you should become more alive there, and what should become quieter. And perhaps that is what all of us trying to do, to create a place that reflects not only who we appear to be, but what we need, what we carry, and who we are trying to become. That's why my work always begins with a person. I want to know what has shaped you, what moves you, which stories, films, places, colors, and works of art make you feel more alive. I take those fragments of your inner world and translate them into a cohesive interior, where every element belongs, every detail echoes another, and the entire space tells a compelling story. A story that could belong to no one but you. If you'd like my help transforming your room or entire home into a space that truly resonates with you, you'll find the details of my interior decorating service in the description. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and I hope this video has changed the way you look at your home and at what it could become. And I'll see you in the next one.